That's you. Okay.
Are you all
I think I'm ready.
loaded up and ready to travel?
I think I am.
Okay, I'm going to ask people to sit down. Ladies and gentlemen, if you'd have a seat, please. If everybody please come in and have a seat. Ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome you to the Atomic Testing Museum. My name is Troy Wade, and I'm the chairman of the Nevada Test Site Historical Foundation. I'm just one of the many people who are working to preserve the heritage and the history of the Nevada Test Site as a major battleground of the Cold War. Tonight is another very special night in the history of this museum. One of the major events was December the 18th, 2001, when we celebrated the 50th anniversary of the Nevada Test Site outside of, in the parking lot of what is now this building. It continued in October of 2003 when we dedicated this magnificent new facility, named the Frank H. Rogers Science and Technology Building after the first RICO Chief Operating Officer in 1951. We followed that dedication with the first and second educational activities of the new Atomic Testing Museum. The first was a fascinating debate between Francis Gary Powers Jr. and Sergei Khrushchev. Francis Gary Powers Jr. is the son of the man who was shot down in the U-2 over the Soviet Union, and Sergei Khrushchev is the son of Nikita Khrushchev, that was the General Secretary of the Soviet Union for many, many years. And to hear those two gentlemen talk about the same instance through the eyes of their respective fathers was fascinating. The next night we had a lecture from Sergei Khrushchev himself on his recollections of his father's prominence as General Secretary of the Communist Party and head of the Soviet Union. Mr. Khrushchev is now a citizen of the United States and is a professor at Brown University, which is another story about how successful communism was not. The third in our series of lectures was last month. We had Tom Reed here. Tom Reed is a former Secretary of the Air Force and a member of the Reagan National Security Council. Tom Reed wrote a book entitled At the Abyss, an Insider's History of the Cold War. His lecture was both insightful and fascinating. Tonight's lecture is the fourth in what we intend will be a continuing educational series in this facility. In fact, the next program is scheduled for Saturday, July the 31st. The speaker will be a noted photographer, Peter Goen. I'm sure it will be just as fascinating as the previous ones, and we'll have more to come on that presentation. Before we get to Professor Titus's presentation, let me bring you all up to date on the schedule for the grand opening of the permanent exhibit area. For those of you in this building for the first time, there are really three pieces to the Atomic Testing Museum. One is the gift shop, which is open. The second is the changing exhibit gallery next to the gift shop, which is open, and it is exactly what the name implies, a gallery in which we will change out the exhibits twice a year, trade things with the Smithsonian and with other nuclear sites. It's open, and I encourage you to go in there. The third and major thing is the permanent exhibit area, which is directly behind you here. That's an 8,000 square foot museum which will open, we hope, in December of this year. The museum exhibits and all of the decoration are being assembled as we speak in a warehouse in New Jersey. We actually sent somebody out there to make sure we weren't putting money into the Teamsters pension fund in New Jersey, but there actually is a warehouse, and they actually are fabricating the museum, and all the parts will come together here in October. They have told us that they will give us the keys on the 18th, on about the 10th of December, and we are planning on a grand opening of the museum in about February of next year, and keep that in mind because it's going to be spectacular. Finally, before I introduce our speaker, I would like to take a moment of silence in memory of two great warriors. We lost a gentleman named Bama McKnight last week. Many of you knew Bama. He was a fixture at the Nevada test site and a volunteer at the Atomic Testing Museum, even when his health almost didn't allow him to get down here. He still came down. The second is, last Thursday we lost Sue Powers, and Sue's the widow of Francis Gary Powers, the U-2 pilot, and we honor him in the exhibit that's in the Changing Exhibit Gallery. Sue's was a long-time resident of Las Vegas, was also a volunteer at the museum, and died very suddenly last Thursday. We'll miss them both, so join me, will you, in just a moment of silence for those two and for President Reagan. Thank you very much. It now gives me great pleasure to introduce our featured speaker. Dina Titus is a professor of political science at UNLV. She's also a longtime member of the Nevada legislature, elected as state senator in 1989. She's a member of many, many organizations and was chairman of the Nevada Humanities Committee for 4 years. Dr. Titus and I go back many years. She was a very vocal critic of the nuclear testing program, dating back to the days when she was on the staff of US Senator Howard Cannon of Nevada. Dina indeed held the government's feet to the fire and championed those whose life had been affected by the test program. She wrote a book, which she will sign tonight after her lecture, entitled Bombs in the Backyard, Atomic Testing in American Politics. One of the best examples of the phrase, politics makes strange bedfellows, is the fact that Dina is one of the key supporters of this museum. She has believed from the outset that the most important thing is to preserve history, be it right or wrong. It was Senator Titus that authored the bill to get state money for this building, and it was Senator Titus that fought for the special license plate for the museum. Her name is on the outside of the Dina Titus Public Reading Room, a much-deserved tribute, the room right next door here. No one can be more pleased than I that our relationship has moved from adversarial to colleagues and good friends. Dina will speak tonight on the mushroom cloud as an American symbol. Please welcome to the podium Dr. Dina Titus.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you, Troy. There's nobody I'd rather be strange bedfellows with than you, Troy, I can tell you. We do go back a long way, and I tell you, the role that I played in making this all happen is very small compared to the vision of Troy Wade, who I call the ultimate cold warrior, and many of the people in this room and the people who serve on his board. This has been a dream for a long time, and it's just very exciting for me to be a part of it. I thank you all for coming tonight, too. This is nice to wear a different hat from the one I wear usually. And also, I have to say that it was great to see those ads in the RJ announcing tonight. Usually when the RJ gives me that much ink, it's on the editorial page, and it's a rant against something that I'm up to. So that was kind of a nice change. I thought I'd talk tonight a little bit, and then we can open it up for discussion because it is kind of a fun topic, with some slides about the mushroom cloud as an American symbol. The the talk could just as easily been called the kitchification of the mushroom cloud. So that's kind of a mouthful. That's hard to spell and hard to pronounce. But indeed, that's what happens when an object becomes a symbol. It goes through this process and turns into kitsch. And that's what we see has happened to the mushroom cloud over the course of the last 50 years. And I use that term kitsch not in any derogatory way at all, but from the positive standpoint of what it means in popular culture for a society. So I don't know, should we dim the lights a little bit, or can y'all see that slide? Not sure. Okay, well then we'll just leave it like it is. The term kitsch, if you're not familiar with it, it's K-I-T-S-C-H, has gained pretty wide currency in the literature since the 1930s, both in the United States and abroad, but the concept itself remains kind of problematic. Some see kitsch strictly in relation to the arts, while others view it more from the historical, sociological standpoint as a phenomenon of the modern age. If you look up kitsch in Webster's dictionary, it's defined simply as something that appeals to popular or lowbrow taste and is often of poor quality. Now, other definitions of kitsch include kitsch as the principle of evil in the value of art, the parody of catharsis, a specifically aesthetic form of lying, and a time capsule with a two-way ticket to the realm of myth. Indeed, defining kitsch is a little bit like the Supreme Court's struggle with defining pornography. As Justice Potter Stewart said, I can't define it, but I know it when I see it. Well, that's kind of the way kitsch is, too. Regardless of how you define it or what definition you accept from scholars and critics, most people agree that kitsch is pretty easy to recognize. It's omnipresent throughout the modern world. There's kitsch on sale wherever tourists go, whether it's the Great Wall or Lourdes, and you've seen some in our own museum store right here. And if you look up kitsch on the internet, Yahoo alone has 42,000 entries for kitsch. Now, this incredible proliferation of kitsch can be attributed to a burgeoning market of people with disposable income to spend on non-essentials, and to the development of techniques first of mass production and later of mass communication. Furthermore, because it's so easily manufactured and so widely distributed, kitsch can be exploited for political as well as commercial purposes, and thus employed by any regime to generate support for a particular ideology or a policy agenda. Now, I believe an excellent example of American kitsch is the mushroom cloud, which since the bombing of Hiroshima has appeared on familiar objects. Somebody out there trying to tell us something, maybe, I don't know. As diverse as record jackets and coffee mugs, T-shirts, and neon signs. Bursting on the scene in 1945, the mushroom cloud was almost immediately recognized the world over as a symbol of U.S. power. And at home, it was quickly promoted by the government to instill awe and fear in the citizenry and thereby build support for Cold War defense policies. Appearing during the détente years when testing moved underground, the cloud has reemerged and today is viewed somewhat wistfully as a nostalgic icon reminiscent of safer, simpler times. Now, while a lot has been written over the last decade about the impacts of the atomic bomb on American culture, not much has been said about the symbolic value of the cloud itself. So this evening, with your indulgence, that's what I'd like to look at. Look at the cloud itself and trace its evolution from an instrument of political kitsch to today in its current reincarnation as a bit of Cold War nostalgic kitsch. Most of the writing on kitsch early on just dealt with the art world, but there are some social psychological critics of it as well. You may be familiar with the writing of Adorno, MacDonald, Colonescu, and Susan Sontag, who have all looked at this notion as part of American society in the modern age. The interest, though, in kitsch and its implications really gained momentum in the 80s, and it moved into the political arena with the publication of two very different books. One of them was fiction and one was academic. The fiction book was Milan Kundero's novel, The Incredible Lightness of Being. You may have read that or seen that movie. That explores communist kitsch as epitomized by the May Day parade. And then similarly, Saul Friedlander examines fascist symbolism in a book, Reflection on Nazism, an essay on kitsch and death. Both works analyze the successful employment of mass-produced images to destroy individualism and to promote a particular ideology. According to Friedlander, kitsch can easily be exploited for political purposes because its inherent qualities lend themselves so readily to effective mobilization of the masses. The message it conveys is simple, straightforward, and thus easily understood by the public. Second, it stimulates an unreflexive and emotional response rather than a rational one. Third, it can be mass-produced quickly and cheaply and both widely marketed and distributed, making it readily accessible to a vast majority of the population. Fourth, it combines aesthetics and politics, using elements of beauty to enhance the values of the regime. And finally, it leads to the stylization of an image which tends to capture obvious mythical patterns, resulting in a reinforcing congruence between construct and form which pervades the popular culture at any given time. Now, clearly, the U.S. Government's persistently glorified depiction of the mushroom cloud throughout the late 40s and 50s is an excellent example of the successful exploitation of political kitsch. Symbolizing the awesome power of American scientific and military know-how, the mushroom cloud was promoted by various administrations to generate support for an arms race designed to win the Cold War and save the free world. All the essential elements of Friedlander's political kitsch are present. Think about it. Simple message, mass distribution, emotional response, beautiful imagery, and stylized form. From the beginning, virtually everyone, young and old alike, recognized the mushroom cloud and knew what it represented. As Scientific Monthly reported in September 1945, just as people recall the circumstances under which they first heard about the news on the attack of Pearl Harbor, so will they remember how the atomic bomb burst upon their consciousness. Let me see if this is working. The first pictures that appeared on front pages across the country were tightly controlled official government releases of the mushroom cloud. They didn't focus on destruction on the ground in Japan or on the bomb itself. Life magazine, with its circulation of over 5 million, devoted much of its August 20th, 1945 issue to the bomb with full-page photographs of the towering mushroom-shaped cloud. Clearly, the message was not only simple and direct, but widely disseminated and easily understood. The public's reaction to this scary new image was based on emotion rather than rational assessment. It was an affective response rather than a cognitive understanding of the implications of the atomic bomb. From the outset, descriptions of detonations focused on the impressive mushroom cloud and were filled with theological references, not empirical data. Even the scientists who first built the atomic bomb responded to the power of their own creation with a decided lack of professional detachment. Thomas Farrell, witnessing the Trinity test, wrote that the blast warned of doomsday and made us feel we puny things were blasphemous to dare tamper with the forces heretofore reserved for the Almighty. And of course, Oppenheimer, we all have heard this, recalled being reminded of the ancient Hindu verse from the Bhagavad Gita, like the splendor of the Mighty One, I am become death, the shadower of worlds. This emotional reaction was exploited throughout the following decade via official AEC releases and public statements by political leaders who used similar imagery to prey on the public's fears. While Senator Joe McCarthy railed against the communist threat, the AEC and the Federal Civil Defense Commission issued thousands of brochures, including this one, which was a little green book. You may remember this was distributed in Nevada. And also posters that always pictured the mushroom cloud. It was always included, that ominous picture of the mushroom cloud. The Civil Defense Administration also produced dozens of films that were shown in schools and churches and social organizations that always featured highlighted footage of the mushroom cloud. The popular media assisted the government in disseminating and further institutionalizing the mushroom cloud as a symbol of American might and right. Widely read and highly respected publications ran articles on the new atomic age in which the mushroom cloud was invariably the centerpiece of every layout. When Harry Truman was named Time Magazine Man of the Year, they had the cover story with a little bitty picture of Harry Truman and a real big picture of the mushroom cloud on the December 21st cover. You also had dozens of other magazines, like this kind of later version of Newsweek, that featured pictures of the mushroom cloud from different tests. The Life magazine Picture of the Week in 1951 was a shot of the mushroom cloud as a backdrop for Glitter Gulch in downtown Las Vegas. There was a 1952 New Yorker article entitled Black Jack and Flashes, which featured photographs of the mushroom cloud, as did a 1953 National Geographic article entitled Nevada Learns to Live with the Atom. Such noted journalists as Walter Cronkite, John Cameron Swayze, and Bob Considine frequently reported on the mushroom cloud from News Knob out at the test site, and they always focused on the visual effects of the cloud with vivid descriptions of the fireball. Now, such media coverage not only facilitated the mass distribution of this emotion-laden symbol, but they also drew on the awesome beauty of the fireball to enhance their message. Spectacular imagery, poetic references, and colorful hyperbole focused the public's collective eye on the aesthetics of the mushroom cloud and glossed over the dangers which resulted from the radioactive fallout. In one extreme case, Gunnery Sergeant Grant Powers, who was the official combat artist in the South Pacific, was commissioned to do a series of watercolor shots that have been reproduced, and you can buy them now on the internet. This was a shot of one of the bikini blasts through binoculars that he did as a watercolor. Here's another one. Again, you see the beauty of the painting. And yet a third. By hiding the truth behind artistically pleasing photographs, films, and officially sanctioned paintings, the government, with the help of the media, successfully diverted the public's attention from asking any substantive questions about possible negative consequences. Dazzled by atomic eye candy, citizens were virtually hypnotized into acceptance. Perhaps the most dramatic evidence of the mushroom cloud as political kitsch found during these early days is the extent to which its stylized image invaded popular culture during the late 40s and 50s. Examples of the symbol's pervasiveness abound. The Atomic Record Company labeled its platters with a mushroom cloud, while the earliest album to feature the cloud on its dust jacket was a Count Basie recording, E = MC². The cover of an October 1946 action comic featured Superman photographing an atomic blast as he hovers near a giant mushroom cloud. Atomic fireballs, you recognize this candy, became a very popular treat, easily recognized by the mushroom cloud on the box. And a publicity still from the first atomic movie put out by MGM called The Beginning or the End depicts four actors gazing to the future with a mushroom cloud looming in the background. The Atomic Cafe in Los Angeles was known for its neon sign in the shape of a mushroom cloud, as was Atomic Liquors, which is still here in Las Vegas. You also had hotels in Las Vegas featuring atomic cocktails that were some ungodly concoction poured over dry ice to make them smoke. Best-selling postcards showed shots of Glitter Gulch with Vegas Vic in the foreground and the mushroom cloud in the background, kind of rising there over Union Station. Similar kinds of best-selling postcards. Also during this period, there was an official photograph of Vice Admiral Spike Blandy, who was celebrating the success of the bikini test in this picture with his wife cutting a mushroom cloud-shaped angel food cake. Her hat looks a bit like a mushroom cloud too, but I don't think that was intentional. Meanwhile, in Las Vegas, you had the Miss Atomic Bomb beauty pageant, where the contestants wore fluffy white mushroom clouds pinned to the front of their bathing suits. And you also had Gigi, who was the hairstylist at the Flamingo, who specialized in pulling your hair up over a wire mushroom frame and then sprinkling glitter in it. It was the perfect do for that special occasion. The Clark County Seal during this time featured a mushroom cloud. You also found it on the cover of the Las Vegas phone book and the 1953 Las Vegas High School yearbook. Walt Disney got into the act during this period and produced a book for children on atomic power. And in the book, the mushroom cloud kind of transmorphs into this benevolent genie. A celebrity in the annual St. George Homecoming Parade was our little Miss A-Bomb, who dressed in crinolines shaped like an atomic cloud. Even retailers used atomic imagery and pictures of mushroom clouds to advertise, this comes from the Las Vegas paper, atom-smashing sales prices. Some might argue that the Welcome to Las Vegas sign is even a stylized version of the mushroom cloud, as is, of course, the old famous Stardust. Such permutations of the cloud in American popular culture serve to create a common sensibility, a kind of harmony among the majority which fostered respect for the established order. By taking a frightening phenomenon and making it familiar, acceptable, and non-threatening, beautiful, and in some cases even desirable, the mushroom cloud ingrained itself in American psyche. Much like whistling in the dark, it helps us to be unafraid, and it shored up our confidence during those highly uncertain times. Accordingly, I would argue it epitomizes political or uplifting kitsch. Now, when testing moved underground in 1963, following the ratification of the Limited Test Ban Treaty, it was a classic case of out of sight, out of mind. Gone was the ubiquitous mushroom cloud from the horizon. Détente replaced the international tensions of the previous decade, and the media, ever fickle, turned their attention to other dramatic visuals, such as race riots in Watts, napalm bombings in Vietnam, and the scantily clad flower generation of Haight-Ashbury. No longer a desirable image employed by the AEC, the mushroom cloud soon faded from the American political and cultural scene. What had once been a generally accepted symbol of everything good about America and simultaneously evil about the Soviet Union was abandoned by the U.S. government as it sought to kind of erase the public's memory of some of the dangerous above-ground testing program consequences. For some 25 years then, the mushroom cloud virtually disappeared from the visual vernacular. It reemerged only sporadically as a symbol of protest within rather limited circles of the anti-nuke movement. A powerful and familiar image, the mushroom cloud also appeared in some protest literature, you can see this, on anti-nuke t-shirts and bumper stickers, in several anti-war movies, including the satire Dr. Strangelove and On the Beach, which has been remade recently. It also graced several record jackets during this period. Among the most notable was Jefferson Airplane's 1968 Crown of Creation, and a No Nukes album that was produced by Elektra Records in '79 and featured protest music by Jackson Browne and Bruce Springsteen. An unintended consequence of this counterculture deployment, I think, was the further kitchification of the mushroom cloud. By disseminating the same political symbol, albeit with a different slant, the protesters actually assisted government in kind of trivializing the dangers of the bomb because they helped to make it both more familiar and more established as an icon of mainstream America. Now, beginning in the late 1980s and then accelerating in the 1990s, the mushroom cloud returned to American popular culture as a powerful symbol. But unlike in the 50s, when it was deliberately promoted by the U.S. government, it kind of resurfaced on its own as what Celeste Olaligaga calls nostalgic kitsch, a cultural fossil that represents a lost golden moment, real or imaginary. Such objects reflect one's memory of a utopian situation which may never have existed, but over time has become glorified. Nostalgic kitsch in this way, then, evokes memories in order to dispel feelings of loss or rootlessness, and it fosters a sense of the past that helps to provide continuity, belonging, and tradition. I think this is clearly the case with the mushroom cloud. In the decade prior to September 11th, it had already become a symbol of simpler, better times, times when we knew who the enemy was and when we knew how to defeat the enemy. We could trust our government during those earlier times. Our children weren't on drugs, our schools were safe, and our heroes weren't just rock stars and athletes. Those were the kinds of times that it represented. Now, there are several factors that account for the revival of the mushroom cloud as this nostalgic kitsch. First, the incredible transition and transformation of world politics allowed this to happen. The international political scene changed, and the end of the Cold War brought a temporary euphoria to American public. Coupled with the moratorium on nuclear weapons testing and nuclear arms reduction agreements, the demise of the Soviet Union allowed U.S. citizenry to issue a collective sigh of relief. As the likelihood of actually needing to use the bomb became more remote, the tendency to view it benignly in retrospect became more acceptable. Also during this time, you had the passage of atomic compensation for victims who were harmed during the period of atmospheric testing for illnesses that they suffered as a result of exposure to radioactive fallout. Granting this compensation further contributed to the softening of feelings toward the bomb. Covered by the compensation program were atomic soldiers, downwinders, nuclear workers, and uranium miners. This long overdue action both assuaged the nation's guilt and eliminated considerable public opposition towards the old A-bomb testing programs. Landmark anniversaries celebrated during this period also fostered a nostalgic look at the nation's atomic past. We had the 50th anniversary of Pearl Harbor, of D-Day, of Trinity, and Hiroshima, for example. So as we were relishing our victory in the Cold War, we were also frequently reminded of our victory over fascism, which ultimately came, of course, with our dropping of the A-bomb. In response to this general nostalgic mood, Madison Avenue during this period had advertising promotions throughout the decade that drew heavily from styles and themes of the 50s. As Breck Eisner, who directed the Burger King's 45th anniversary spot, you may remember this, Shaquille O'Neal goes into a Burger King in the 50s, put it, there's a comfort zone here. Martinis, fur coats, and imported cigars, all artifacts from a bygone era of American greatness, have once again become desirable articles for the middle class consumption. Today you can once again get a vanilla Coke, for example. Vintage fashions and retro furniture fueled a cultural willingness among Americans to reflect upon, reminisce about, and subconsciously gloss over any offensive aspects of a mythical golden age. Finally, the release of The Atomic Cafe, which was an award-winning film that was intended to illustrate the naivete of the American public during the early years of the Cold War, inadvertently contributed to the reemergence of the bomb, or the cloud. This movie, if you haven't seen it, is a collage of news clips and excerpts from old military training and civil defense films that reintroduced the audience to now obviously kind of pernicious public relations campaign that was employed by the government to build support for the arms race. When you see it, at first you're shocked at how foolish Americans must have been to believe such absurd claims. But you soon catch yourself kind of smiling as you watch an animated Bert the Turtle sing and dance to the tune of Duck and Cover. Other scenes from this movie have an interview with atomic soldiers, real atomic veterans who are trying to mask their fear with false bravado before they go out onto the test site in one of the tests. And you have a father explaining to his children when it will be safe to leave the fallout shelter and go outside and look around. All of these things, when you see them, evoke a sense of poignancy, and I think poignancy is the first step towards nostalgia. The soundtrack that was released at the same time as this movie further reinforces this sentimentality with original cuts from some atomic songs from the 40s and 50s. You may remember When the Atomic Bomb Fell, Old Man Adam, and Jesus Hits Like an Atomic Bomb. Now, in the wake of Atomic Cafe, the proliferation of the mushroom cloud occurred on a number of different fronts. At the movies, there was a renewed fascination with stories set against an atomic background. And unlike the earlier science fiction films, a genre which many people attribute to Living in the Shadow of the Clouds, these were realistic dramas which used sets, costumes, and footage of mushroom clouds to evoke nostalgic images of the 50s. There were a bunch of these movies. Here are just some of the slides. I'd like to thank also Robert Frederick from the DOE who helped me put together a whole bunch of these different movie posters. Specifically, Desert Bloom was one of these movies. It was the coming-of-age story of a young woman in 1950s Las Vegas whose loss of innocence parallels the loss of innocence of the nation as both watch the mushroom cloud on the horizon. Just a little aside about this, I helped them to find sets for this movie, and they couldn't find anything in Las Vegas that looked like it was still from the 50s. You know, here we don't save anything, we just blow it up, so they had to end up going to Tucson to film it. You also had Fat Man and Little Boy that starred Paul Newman as General Leslie Groves. It was a fairly accurate accounting of the Manhattan Project with the exception of the accident. And you had Nightbreaker, which was a flashback narrated by Martin Sheen, who plays an atomic soldier participating in the war games at the test site. Mulholland Falls was another one. That was a detective story, which Nick Nolte discovers the protection of radiation secrets at the test site is a motive for murder. Blue Sky features Jessica Lange, she won the Academy Award for this, as a lonely wife in search of the truth about her husband's involvement in the testing program. And you even had a comedy called Blast from the Past, which Brendan Fraser is a young man who emerges after spending his entire 35 years in a fallout shelter to discover that styles and attitudes have changed a little during the period he was underground. But in all of these movies, the attitudes and the styles and the setting are all portrayed kind of in a time-warp presentation, and they evoke the memories of these simpler times. During the same period, we've also seen TV shows in addition to the History Channel that has commemorated those anniversaries that I mentioned. Day One was a big TV show based on a book that was a less theatrical version of the story of the Manhattan Project. Trinity and Beyond was on the Discovery Channel. You had a documentary done by the people who did Star Wars that included some atomic blasts that were only recently released under the newly open policy of the DOE. Novelists also have begun to look at this period of time for plot lines. Both of these were best-selling novels. Martin Cruz Smith's spy novel, The Stallion Gate, and Joseph Cannon's provocative murder mystery, Los Alamos, were both set in New Mexico during the Manhattan Project days. And they, like I said, were both bestsellers. They're really good. I recommend them. Critics heaped praise on both authors for their splendid blend of fact and fiction in a way that brings this portentous page of history to vivid life. You also had the Pulitzer Prize-winning author Robert Owen Butler, who used Los Alamos as a backdrop for his novel, Countrymen of Bones, that has to do with an archaeologist on a dig out from the original Trinity site. These films and novels not only drew upon romanticized images from the past, but they also projected a sense of excitement and intrigue that is appealing to the viewer or to the reader. They all included atomic blasts, but at the same time they were believable stories about ordinary people, not fantasies about shrinking men or giant women or the end of the war. End of the world, Such stylistic maneuvers helped create a sentimentalized myth about this period in history, and thus reinforced the transition of the mushroom cloud as a symbol of those times into nostalgic kitsch. The publication of some nonfiction books during this period also helped with this transition. You may have seen these as coffee table picture books. Picturing the Bomb was by Rachel Fermi, who is the granddaughter of, the noted scientist Enrico Fermi. That was kind of a scrapbook of her times as a child at Los Alamos. You also had Katrina Mason's Children of Los Alamos. That's an oral history. And finally, Peter Bacon Hale's Atomic Spaces, Living in the Manhattan Project. So all of those are available now. In addition to the literary world, the art world has also gotten interested in the mushroom cloud again. Troy mentioned that the next lecture is going to be by Peter Goyne. He is a photographer at the UNR and has a book called Nuclear Landscapes. It's just wonderful pictures taken out at the test site that remind people of those doomsday tests where you set up the doomed town, and then blew them up with the atomic blast. You also have The Body of a House by a local artist, Robert Beckman, who did a series of dramatic 8 large-scale iodine-colored paintings that surround the viewer with a millisecond visualization of this house that was demolished by a test here at the Nevada test site. Describing the exhibit, Beckman elaborates, "The imagery is familiar to anyone who grew up in the 50s. The photograph depicted a 2-story farmhouse being destroyed by an above-ground test. As a child, that house could have been my own." The text of Carol Gallagher's photographic essay, American Ground Zero, is more overtly anti-government than the other two that I mentioned, but her many pictures of individuals like this atomic cowboy also play on sentimentality. Taking a little bit different, but no less nostalgic approach, this is a picture from an article by Bruce McCall called The Last Dream-orama that appeared in the New Yorker. It was a series of fantasy cars from the 50s. Now this car he calls the Armageddon MK1. You can see it's pictured beneath a mushroom cloud, and this is how the description reads if you can't read it. What better symbolized the American way than a top-down roadster with a foot-thick radiation shield and enough canned bologna in the backseat fallout shelter to feed the whole gang? Oh boy, road trip. Other popular magazines have reinforced this nostalgia. Newsweek devoted an almost entire issue to the bomb on its 40th anniversary. Time featured a cover story with the mushroom cloud over Hiroshima during the same date, and People magazine featured an interview and photographs of pilot Paul Tibbets recalling, of course he flew the Enola Gay, recalling this 55 years after Hiroshima. Historic Preservation Academic Journal ran a story, Echoes of the Cold War, with photographs of blasts from the test site, and Archaeology included an essay entitled Proving Ground of the Nuclear Age, in which they are making some of the sites, and you can hear about this from people more knowledgeable than I am, on the Federal Register of Historic Sites, some of the doomed towns and places that are part of the testing ground, like Yucca Flats and Frenchman's Flats. An offshoot of this renewed public fascination with the early days of atomic testing is illustrated in the new growing promotion of what they call atomic tourism. There's a Bureau of Atomic Tourism. You can find this at the website with lots of information about different places, atomic places, and it has been graded an A by Entertainment Weekly and selected as one of 20 web gems by the Wall Street Journal. It's dedicated to promoting tourist locations around the world that have either been the site of atomic explosions, distribute exhibits, or have vehicles that were used in some of the atomic weapons delivery. If you click for more information, you can find places such as the Los Alamos County Historical Museum. One of the things that they sell at the Los Alamos gift shop is this Remember When calendar with pictures of the old bomb, and also earrings shaped like Fat Man and Little Boy. We have some articles. Let me give a little plug for our store here at the museum. You can find some articles. I don't believe we have any earrings of Fat Man and Little Boy. Oh, we do? Oh, sorry. We do. Okay. All right. Meanwhile, Travel Channel, but even the Travel Channel has had a special on tours that you can take of the Nevada test site. And here's an interesting one. Condé Nast Travel magazine featured this tour of Bikini Atoll, where adventuresome scuba divers can explore the wrecks of the warships sunk during the atomic maneuvers. If you can read that, it says, a week on the island, including 11 decompression dives and a glow-in-the-dark souvenir, oh, just kidding, is $2,750. And then AAA's Via magazine recently has had a short article called Testing, 1, 2, Kaboom that also featured how you can sign up for a tour of the test site. It says, tour the test site where hundreds of huge saucer-like indentations dot the landscape. Las Vegas Life, which is a pretty widely distributed promotional magazine, included this feature story, Scenes from My Vacation, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Have a Blast During the Hot Spots of the Cold War, appeared. Of course, borrowing from Dr. Strangelove, he takes you through different places in the Southwest that have some atomic connection, including Los Alamos, Roswell, the Biosphere, and, of course, the Nevada test site. He concludes with the question, who needs pseudoscience when the real stuff is so damn dramatic? A shorter piece in the same magazine, and this is by Los Angeles-based writer William Fox, who used to be in Las Vegas, is a rather tongue-in-cheek proposal to turn the test site into a theme park. He argues in this blast from the past that the test site would make a hot tourist attraction, and ends with the question, if other states direct visitors to Civil War sites, why should we ignore a living site that demonstrates the invention of the biggest gamble of all? In our neighboring state, in this magazine called Around Albuquerque, which is a pretty slick tourist magazine that you find in all the hotels, they included a story about the pilgrimage to Trinity site, talking about how to get to Ground Zero and what to wear for trekking around on the 2 days it's open to the public. It says, come and stand where at man's command the atom first turned itself inside out. So you see there is a lot of tourist interest in visiting these sites. In fact, one of the Good Sam's Club has the mushroom cloud as part of the patch that it wears and go around in the trailers traveling around. Well, whether serious or humorous, these various tourist promotions evoke nostalgic images and are always accompanied by pictures of the mushroom cloud. Now, finally, the return of the cloud has also sparked a wave of atomic consumerism as shoppers try to collect a lot of memorabilia from this period. There are several atomic-related websites that offer a whole bunch of different kind of products that you can order. There are lots of posters from various shots, real and imagined. You've got Warheads candy that you can order. You can see these little warheads. You can now get low-fat atomic fireballs. You can get a Simpson mask of the Simpsons Radiation Man. And here's one of my favorites, Atom Bomb, one of the Garbage Pail Kids. And this key ring. All you see have the Mushroom Cloud logo. I gave this talk at the Historical Society in Los Alamos, and the present that they gave me was this bottle of wine from a vineyard close by there. I haven't drunk it yet, I'm not sure, but anyway, I like the label. And here's a new book that's come out, Atomic Cocktails. You can buy this at Barnes & Noble with hot drinks, mixed drinks for modern times. So you see it's caught on commercially as well as artistically and in literary circles. Many of these same products that are available on the internet, and I showed you up here, were recently highlighted in an exhibit at the University of Iowa called The 50s, From Atomic Power to American Pie. Similarly, the Brooklyn Museum of Art organized a touring exhibit last year called Vital Forms, American Art and Design in the Atomic Age. Among the things that they featured were curvy mushroom cloud-shaped furniture. These were pieces from the 50s. During the 60s, they were rejected as a style for being too tacky, but now they're back, and you find them around in a lot of trendy restaurants. Just think about the furniture next time you go in Starbucks that has some of those mushroom cloud shapes to it. Smithsonian Magazine did an article that this picture comes from on that exhibit and referred to the decorative arts of that period as bouncing to the detonation of exploding atoms. Well, nowhere was this reemergence of the cloud more evident than it was here in Las Vegas. Now, that's not surprising given the nature of Las Vegas culture, which is based mostly on kitsch, but also we have always had a lot of political and economic support in southern Nevada for the test site, and that support is expressed even today by political leaders of both parties. Also, what happened here in Nevada to help to bring the mushroom cloud back, of course, I think is a celebration of the test site's 50th anniversary and the recent creation of the Nevada Test Site Historical Foundation. And of course, this wonderful facility and the new museum and research center, I think, have propelled the mushroom cloud kind of back on center stage. The Test Site Historical Foundation's brochure includes the mushroom cloud on the cover, and the foundation's literature and logo, again, is a stylized mushroom cloud against a blue background. It appears on official stationery and also on things for sale like T-shirts and hats. I give us another little plug. Also available are commemorative calendars, photographs, postcard reproductions, which are kind of fun. And when this first adventure started, and these things were offered in a little room at the DOE headquarters, which has come a long way from there to here, this is the story that ran in the newspaper, the museum with a kick. And so that's a nice kind of memory. Certainly we have come a long way from that one little room selling things to what we have here at this great facility today. Not only is there a library, there are artifacts, it's a research center, a convention area, the museum. It is a wonderful way to commemorate, I think, what the test site has meant for Southern Nevada, and a way to make this available to scholars, to journalists, just to tourists, and to people with a passing interest in kind of what our history has been like, another side of Southern Nevada, certainly. The groundbreaking for this facility that coincided with the 50th anniversary of the test site was very interesting. It was attended by a lot of public officials who made a lot of speeches. And following the speeches, the guests all got to ignite little A-bombs, which spewed smoke and silver confetti in the background, which seemed kind of appropriate. The newspaper said, with miniature mushroom clouds rising behind them, Nevada politicians applaud fireworks to mark the 50th anniversary of the test site. You also have a publication you're probably familiar with called Sightlines, and Sightlines is a DOE publication distributed to a lot of test site employees and other interested parties, and it ran a year-long series commemorating 50 years at the test site, and focused on events and places and people who had been at the test site for a long time. And this helped to, I think, bring attention to this anniversary. The News Knob is the name of the newsletter from the foundation, and it's also had a number of stories reminiscing about this period. On December 18th, 2001, the actual date that President Truman announced that they would be blowing up bombs in our backyard, the Review-Journal ran this as a part of a three-part series. Again, the picture of the mushroom cloud. Now, recently, the businesses have picked up on this again here in Las Vegas, much as they did during the 50s. Look at this ad that the Stratosphere ran for Vegas Vintage Night, using the picture of Miss Atomic Bomb as a way to be nostalgic and lure potential players. You also, if you've eaten lately in McCormick and Schmick, you'll notice that there's an old atomic postcard that hangs there with some of the pictures on the way to the restroom, and so that's kind of part of their nostalgia. Here's another ad that's appeared recently. This is an interesting one by Centra, which is a professional health service. This is emphasizing its virtues as a home-based company. We've welcomed prostitutes, gamblers, and atomic bombs, but we don't want any out-of-state workers' compensation programs, I tell you that. Look at this one. Nevada State Bank ran this recently, and you ask the reader in script below this mushroom cloud, just waiting for the fallout? Don't panic. We're the bank that can provide you service. New Line Cinema did a film festival and a dance competition at the Boulevard Mall that was called The Blast from the Past, an atomic swing thing. And if you look at Bechtel's new brochure that talks about all the things that are happening at the test site today, there's still the picture of a mushroom cloud. The Las Vegas high culture scene, they really like this girl. They put her on everything. Has also responded with some enthusiasm. Neon is the publication of the Nevada Arts Council, and this edition included several short stories and poems and pictures about Nevada's atomic past. The Contemporary Arts Collective sponsored a fashion show fundraiser called Hot Hot Oats, the Atomic Lounge. The program invited guests to join us for a radiant evening, and of course included a picture of a mushroom cloud. The Nevada Humanities Committee sponsored a lecture series, Nevada and the Nuclear Age, and the program was one of Peter Goins' pictures. And of course, the Nevada Press published this book with a mushroom cloud on the cover. Just recently in the paper, we also saw the story of this person, Marcus Rothkranz, who's developed a TV pilot called Atomic City, which is a spoof on this period of time. You see all the things that he's collected. I don't think he's sold it yet, but he's peddling it out there as a series. One last element of nostalgic kitsch, which kind of brings us full circle and brings us to a close, is something that Troy mentioned, and that is kind of interesting because it was sanctioned by government, but it's also, so maybe it's also political kitsch, and that's the atomic license plate. This was an official license plate that we passed in the Nevada legislature. You know, we have lots of special license plates. I introduced this bill to create a special license plate so that some of the money for selling it would go to support the museum. Passed the legislature overwhelmingly. We had a contest to draw the design, and this is the design that won the competition. Of course, it has a mushroom cloud on it. Well, George Knapp loves this. He wants number one when it finally gets made, and this is what he said on television. This plate will rock. No sissy flowers or waterfall or scenery for us like on other states' plates. We're talking the big one, the A-bomb, serious firepower. Suffice to say, our plate will kick sand in the face of any other plates on the road. Well, what happened was Kenny Gwynn got a little scared of this, thought it was too controversial, and indeed it was controversial. I got calls from the London, the BBC. I happened to be in Greece on the beach one day right after the session was over, and my husband was reading the International Herald Tribune. He said, "You're not going to believe this. Here's your license plate in the paper." So it was controversial. But anyway, the governor said, no, we can't have a license plate with a mushroom cloud on it. Well, Troy and I haven't given up. We're going back next time. We're going to see if we can't get this license plate with the mushroom cloud. But so if we get it on, we hope some of y'all will buy this to help to support the museum. So where does that really leave us today? I think we're in kind of an unfortunate situation. Just as the mushroom cloud was kind of settling down on the knick-knack shelf of America's past, international events have dramatically changed and threatened its kind of cultural fossil status. After September 11th, peace was shattered, and fear has been reinstated as kind of the prevailing national emotion. Laughing at ourselves and our kind of picturesque atomic past no longer really seems appropriate. Osama bin Laden's possible development of nuclear weapons, together with the India-Pakistan saber-rattling, North Korea, President Bush's talk of weapons of mass destruction. All of those things have now kind of changed the direction of things, and they kind of suggest that there may be a return to Cold War-like nuclear policy. So this kind of nostalgic attitude may not last very long and may not indeed be appropriate. So the question now becomes, what will the role of the mushroom cloud be as part of popular culture as we move into the new century? Can it possibly be exploited anew by the current political regime for the same reasons as before, to help promote a certain policy? Will it no longer be viable as a symbol? Is a new symbol going to be something like a wanted poster of bin Laden or the New York skyline without the Twin Towers? Will it remain a reminder of safer times? Will the opponents take it up again as a symbol of protest? Will it fall from favor in Nevada as the Yucca Mountain becomes more imminent of a threat? Or will it just disappear altogether because it's no longer relevant? I'm not sure what the answer to that is, but I think it will probably be a temporary thing. So my advice to you is to hang on to those bomb-shaped earrings and that old stuff that you find in your attic maybe, because it'll bring a good price at some flea market in the future, or you can donate it to our museum for a tax write-off. Thank you very much.
Any questions for Dina?
Absolutely, and that was part of that duck and cover, where the little turtle ducks and cover, ducks in his shell. You know, they said that they had the drills, and I remember those. You know, they did the drill, and then you ducked under your desk, and you could be safe. That's become kind of duck and cover and kiss your ass goodbye. It's kind of how it's Well, I'd be interested in your memories or your thoughts on any of this. Well, thank you very much. You've been kind.
Need to stay here just a minute. I would like to point out my kitchen tie.
Yeah.
And although Dina was correct, the logo for the Nevada Test Site Historical Foundation is a mushroom cloud. This is the new proposed logo for the Atomic Testing Museum. We wanted a different identification when the museum opens, and so we're now kitschifying the atom. Dina, I want to thank you very much, and I have for you. That was just a fascinating presentation. We have a book we want to give you, and it's called The 100 Suns, and a photographer named Peter Light, and the whole thing is photographs of mushroom clouds, and so you should add this to your collection.
I certainly will.
And it says, in grateful appreciation, the NTS Historical Foundation. So, Dina, thank you again.
Thank you.
Very, very much. That concludes the program. Remember that we will have Peter Goen here on July the 31st, which is a Saturday night, to do a lecture and a book signing, and we will now adjourn to the lobby where you can purchase copies of the book Bombs in My Backyard, signed by the author, and some refreshments. Thank you all very much for coming.
I've got to figure out some way to do it. Thank you.
We're selling lots of books. I came to buy.